Okay, good morning. Call the Finance Committee to order for its 18 November meeting. All members, Alderwoman Finlayson, Alderman Peone are present. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I understand there is a request for an addition to the agenda. Is that under supplemental appropriations?
It's actually
P421.
It's an FT, so it's not a supplemental.
No, it's a budget revision.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the agenda with the inclusion of FT 421.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the November 4th meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. First item on the approved agenda is SA 2221. Madam Finance Director, do you want to give us a brief explanation of this, please?
Yes, this is a supplemental appropriation so that we can establish the correct amount for this waterway improvement grant, plus put it in one place. We had the grant in, let me see, City Council approved. It's in a project for 104, but the actual grant is 191. And so the grant was also budgeted in the operating grant for the grant fund for 250, and we will delete the appropriation from the grants fund.
I'm not sure I know what that last means.
So when we set this up, originally we had been budgeting these types of grants in the grants fund, but this one is capital in nature and is constructing an asset. So we put it in the CIP. But when we put it in the CIP, we put it in for 100, we put it in for 104 instead of the 191. And then that other piece remains in the grants fund. So we're trying to move it to capital and make it for the right amount.
Okay. Are there questions from the committee?
I have a question. Ms. Dickinson, you mentioned 204, I think was the number I heard you say.
Hopefully not. It's when we did the capital budget, we had it in there at 104.
Okay.
And it needs to be 191.
Okay.
And the amount that they had over in the grant fund was 250, so that was the wrong amount as well. So we're going to take that out of the system so nobody can charge to that grant project.
But that correction is not part of this supplemental action.
No. So we don't necessarily need to come to you to delete something like that. We just take it out of the Munis system so nobody spends the money accidentally. And in the cases where we get a grant that's less than what we had budgeted, that's what we've been doing as well. We just, we decrease the amount that's shown in Munis for the appropriation so that nobody can spend it. We bring it down to the grant level. Grant funding level. So
my understanding is we budgeted 104, we actually got 191.
Correct.
This $87,000 is to recognize that we actually got more than we budgeted.
Correct.
So we're doing this adjustment to recognize that so it can be appropriated.
Correct.
I still have
not a bad deal. Ask for 104 and get 191.
Yeah.
I'm still unclear about the 250. We budgeted 250. So what happens
in the grants fund, in the operating budget, in the grants fund?
Okay. So what happens to the additional $52,000?
Right. So this document that you see here is going to adjust the capital budget, not the operating budget. We had this project shown in the capital budget at 104. We now need it to be 191. I added that sentence about the the operating budget, the operating grants budget, because it was in there as well. And we've decided we're going to continue with it in the capital budget. The amount that was in the operating grants budget was $250, and we're removing that.
Okay, so it is not in the operating budget, and we don't have a surplus in the operating budget as a result of this?
Correct, correct. We're going to delete that grant project out of the grants fund.
Okay. All right, I'm clear. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'll move recommended approval of SA 2221.
Thank you. Is there
I'll second.
any further discussion? All in favor of recommending favorably SA 22-21 to the City Council signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. All right. So that concludes that part of the agenda. We now move to FT 4-21, which we have amended the agenda to consider. And we have two documents here, actually three. The first one is the actual document FT 4-21 that shows the winds and withers of this money. The transfer is another one of these becoming familiar transfer from police and fire salaries and benefits in the amount of $37,500 each to the mayor's office for supplies and others of $28,000 plus and contractual services of $46,700. And then there is a supplemental set of information. But before we go to that, Director Gerald, and maybe we do need the city attorney for this, I'm getting a number of questions about the actual legality of making these kinds of switches. When we talked about this for the big one, which was for the repairs to the e-Trackit system, this body was told in the council that we checked with the Treasury Department and that we cannot use and we could not spend in time the CARES money to go directly to using that for the e-Trackit system, but that it was legal to use the CARES money for police and fire salaries and then use that excess to be transferred over. I really hope that we have sound footing to do this. That's one thing. The other thing, though, is I hope we're not going to be making a habit of every time we want money using this as a mechanism to take money out of police and fire. And one of my big worries is if some of these people who are expressing concern this is not a kosher transaction, is that we're going to end up very short in the police and fire salaries and benefit funds.
For your last sentence there, this actually moves actual expenses out of the police department and fire department and over to a grant. So it actually relieves the pressure on that budget.
And as far as use of the CARES funds,
that is mind blowing. It says it's coming out of salaries and benefits. So that means that there is less money in police and fire
budget
for salaries and in their budget for salaries and benefits.
Correct. And then as a follow-up to this, if you approve it, we will move an equivalent amount of actual salaries over to the grant.
Right. And that maneuver is what I have constituents questioning the legality.
I was just addressing your last, that it would put more pressure on the police and fire budget.
Oh yeah, no.
No, it's not. It won't put more pressure on their budget. It is a neutral impact is what I'm saying on their budget. You're moving the budget over and you're moving the actual.
Well, okay, I am confused by that, but I think what's happening is we're moving actual appropriations from police and fire to this account, and we're supplementing that by moving in money from CARES money back to police and fire to backfill to cover those salaries and benefits.
Yes, but the maneuver is actually removing expenses from the general fund and transferring the expenses to the grant. We don't bring the grant into the general fund. We move expenses out to the grant.
When you say grants, is that the CARES money?
Yes.
All right.
It's being accounted for in the grants fund, not in the general fund.
But will police and fire both be down $37,500 without having a transfer of CARES grant money back to them to cover salaries and benefits?
Okay. So what I'm saying is the effect on their budgets is neutral. One, we remove $37,500 from each of their budgets. Right. However, we also remove the actual salary expenses out of their division and move it to the grants fund.
And the grant fund that we're moving it to
is CARES grant fund. Yes. Yes, I'm just saying, right. When you talk about it, you're talking like we're bringing grant money into the police budget. We're not. We're moving money out of the general fund police budget over to the grants fund.
But it is that very use of the CARES money that is being questioned by attorneys in my ward in terms of whether, in fact, people who work for the Treasury Department, is questioned whether that is actually a legal use of the CARES funds. And my recollection was we were told back when we did this before for the e-Trackit system that we consulted with, I believe it was Treasury, someone in the federal government, and we were told that this is a legal use of CARES money, even though in actuality, it's not going to treat things or deal with things that have directly to do with the pandemic.
So Alderman Arnett?
Yes.
So what we checked on was whether the system that we were procuring to replace e-Trackit would be a suitable use of the CARES funding. Because other cities have done that, and we wanted to hear that directly from them. We've had guidance from early on that police and fire labor expenses can be covered with the CARES funding. So that hasn't been the question. The question was whether we could use the CARES funding for that software system. Because of the deadline and the inability to expend the money prior to December 30th for that system, that's why we did this swap. But I don't think, and Carrie can certainly weigh in on use of CARES for police and fire salaries, but that has been a pretty widely acknowledged thing that we can do. And we're a sub-grantee of the county, and the county is certainly planning to do that with their CARES money as well. So,
but before we hear from Ms. Berger, I think implicit in the CARES money is that it is there to supplement police and fire activities in this case that are directly brought about because of the pandemic, not just to pay for other business as usual kinds of things. So can we show that we have $37,500, or in the case of the e-Trackit, $250,000 or whatever it was, of COVID-related activities that the CARES money is going to cover? In other words, these are new activities because of the pandemic, not just routine. And this is the thrust of what the questions I'm getting are, you're paying for routine operations with CARES money, and you're not directly relating it to the new incurred costs of the pandemic. Ms. Berger,
Gary,
can
do you
you
want-
help me? Because I'm
happy to help you.
frightened, and what I'm really frightened of ultimately is somebody's going to come back check this. We've been very transparent about these operations, and I give the administration credit for that. But because we're so transparent, it's going to be an easy trail to track down and come back after the fact and say, you were not properly using these CARES money for their intended purpose. You were using it for normal business operations, and they're going to want it back.
So the U.S. Department of Treasury put out guidance that specifically says that as a matter of administrative convenience, payroll expenses for public safety, so police, fire, OEM, can be used using CARES Act funding. I think what you were sort of mixing the hazard pay aspect of using CARES Act funding with the payroll services part. So the Treasury has sort of maintained from the beginning that it's, you know, and it's up to the leader of the municipality. So it'd be up to the mayor to determine otherwise, but it is for sort of convenience purposes that it's automatically assumed that public safety, you know, didn't anticipate a pandemic of this sort coming up and was going to be reallocated or redeployed in different fashions than they normally are. So it sort of is a blanket across the board for your sworn firefighters, police officers, OEM. So it is a sort of they do give you that as a matter of administrative convenience caveat, if you will.
Well, for the record, I have to say that I'm still uncomfortable, but as long as we know this is coming out of the mayor's pocket, I'm okay with it. He'll make good this money out of his salary, I assume. Being serious, though, I think I have two concerns. One, I still feel like we budgeted for business as usual. I don't see anywhere when we did the budget exercises that we're upping the expenditures by police and fire specifically because of additional duties for the pandemic. Now, I can be wrong on that, and I'd certainly welcome seeing where we specifically showed that in the budget book. I didn't see it. But more to the point is, I'm worried that we're now starting to develop a habit of transferring from police and fire to fund a whole bunch of other projects that are current projects that can be completed ostensibly before the end of the year, although I would really like to see the new schedule for the particular thing to see if those really are being spent in this year. I'm just concerned that we're starting to establish a pattern of, oh goody, here's some free money, let's dig in and finance a bunch of things. And I think that our responsibility as alderpersons and oversight of the budget and delivery of city services is we need to be the checks and balances, the people that question and make sure that we're doing these things appropriately. I think, Ms. Berger, you're telling me that we are, that you are the legal advice on this. And so as far as I'm concerned, I have gone and we have gone as a committee to our council, and our council is telling us that we are on solid footing. Am I characterizing that correctly?
Are you asking me that? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So we'll set that aside. I still am concerned about, I hope there are not a whole bunch of plans for other kinds of runs on the biggest pot of money, which is police and fire salaries and benefits. But I guess if it's tolerable to a majority of the council, 2 runs on this mechanism may be acceptable. A steady stream of them, I want to put down my marker right now. I would be very uncomfortable with that. So with that said,
Mr. Chair, may I ask Ms. Berger a question?
Sure.
Ms. Berger, do the rules of supplanting not apply when we're dealing with COVID money? Because I have to agree with Alderman Arnett. It looks like word's gotten out that we've got COVID money, so let's figure out how we can manipulate other funding and we'll just use COVID money to supplant. That's what it feels like. So am I misinterpreting something?
So it's my understanding that well, let me start kind of back at the basics. So the CARES Act money is only being applied to police and fire payroll. And so that is a appropriate usage of the CARES Act money. That frees up some of the money in our general fund. And Jody, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong because finance is not my thing. But and what we do with that money that's freed up does not have to be within the confines of the requirements of the CARES Act. But my understanding is that it actually still is, because it's a program that is going to allow for, I guess, a more sort of, I don't want to say virtual inspections, but I think that might be a component of it. And it allows for sort of adhering better to coronavirus restrictions for the inspectors themselves and the program, so that people can utilize it and it doesn't have as many hiccups as maybe Track It does and from home and whatnot. So it's also an appropriate use of the CARES Act funding. So separately, they're both appropriate usages of CARES Act funding, but specifically as it relates to what is occurring here is you can use the CARES Act funding to cover the public safety payroll, and then what happens with that money that sort of is taken from the payroll doesn't necessarily have to adhere to the CARES Act requirements. So and it's not sort of like I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's good. And it's not any sort, because it feels like supplanting to me. And that's what we've been warned against for years and years and years. So I just want to make sure that we're not going down that road, that we're not supplanting funding with CARES money. You know what I mean?
I understand what you're saying. I don't think, I wouldn't consider it that. So I would say that, while you're, obviously it's okay to be concerned about it, but I don't think that this is what your sort of typical supplanting issue would be. I think it's more so just a matter of because it takes so long to get this new program up and running, that it's just to ensure that we can get the program done and there's no issues on the back end if we were to use the CARES Act funding for that. So it's sort of to avoid any hiccups with the CARES Act eligibility, because it was going to go beyond the December 30th deadline. We didn't want to put money towards that that would take us beyond that deadline and potentially have to be sent back to the U.S. Department of Treasury.
All right. Is the committee ready to move on to what we're transferring this money for? I think we've received quite clear and explicit counsel that concerns raised by constituents, I think concerns I harbored anyway, and obviously Alderwoman Finlayson, you have also. I think we've received counsel that says that what we're doing is a legitimate transaction, and I don't know that we have any more to say on it than that. That's our counsel, so we will move and act accordingly. The next question is what we're doing with these monies once they go to the mayor's office. And I have a document from yesterday that has a set of dates. I think I'm hearing there's a newer document, but I'm assuming that the overall thrust of the program, unless if it's only date changes, is the same from one document to the next. Am I correct in that assumption? Should I address this?
The way I read it.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay. Could I ask quickly so I can mark up the document I have? What are the date changes? So in phase one, clearly we're well beyond November 2nd. So what are the new dates on this? Should the new dates on this document be?
November 30th to March 5th. Greetings. How y'all doing?
November. Say that again, please.
November 30th to March 5th.
March 5th?
Correct.
Okay. And then phase two is now
but it's all the phases are basically within that 90-day initiative.
What are the dates for phase one? Jody and Takia, while we're waiting for that, I have to say that I really, as chair of this committee, and I'll seek counsel or support from my colleagues, getting these last minute things is really unsatisfactory to me. I think that if we can't get things on the agenda in time for it to be promulgated for the public to see, we should not amend the agenda to take it on unless there is a severe crisis. In this case, I think there is some potential time sensitivity, although I want to explore that. But I think this is a violation of the Open Meetings Act in that there's no way the public, through our proper notice channels, could have known that we were going to have this on their agenda, and therefore could not beware to tune in to listen to this discussion. And it also makes it tough. We're trying to juggle papers and juggle sources of information, and I think that it puts pressure to act precipitously and without due deliberation. But I see.
I agree with what you said, but you know, we're kind of between a rock and a hard place on this. This is CARES money, and we have to get it spent. I mean, I can't just call Mrs. Payne and say, spend this money.
No, it's not, Fred. It's not CARES money. It's
okay.
But it is trying to address some of the community stress we're seeing now. So okay. I understand that you don't like the last minute items. We know that, and this was moved forward more quickly at the request of the mayor's office as to the importance of this program. So I think that they can explain to you the urgency of it, and you can decide how to move forward.
Alderwoman Finlayson, you have your hand up.
I think we need standards, and we don't have. And I think we should set a standard here and now that anything coming before the Finance Committee should be given to us at a certain date, and not a specific date, but a time, you know, maybe 2 weeks before the meeting or something.
Well,
because I agree.
Yeah,
I
at
agree.
Least
Getting
when
it
it goes out for public notice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 3 days then yeah. I would make a motion that any documents coming before the Finance Committee that are not of an urgent nature, and this is really not of an urgent nature because this has been going on all year, should be to the committee 4 days in advance.
Is there a second to that motion?
Well, I don't think we need 4 days, but we need a lot more than we had this time.
Well, I say 4 days because if there's 3 day public notification.
Yeah, okay.
And that 1 day will give Takia an opportunity to receive it and then figure out how to
I get it.
Yep.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? I will add that this is also a burden on Takia because she is the one that helps us get out the public notice. And I think this program is one that needs public note because I happen to subscribe to the intent of this. I'm not sure I have some questions about the specifics of it, but this is the very kind of thing that we want the public to know that we're doing, and hopefully they can weigh in with any questions, but also weigh in with support. So I think public notice on these sorts of things is paramount. With no further discussion, all those in favor of making that a Finance Committee policy signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Now, getting back to the specifics, the question I had asked is I don't have the newer documents, so I'm just asking simply on the newer document, apparently the only change is date changes. So my question is, what are the dates for phase 1?
So it'll be November 30th to January 1st. And then January 2nd to February 28th.
That's phase.
Sorry, February 1st.
Are we now moving to phase 2? Is that February? Yep. So February 1st to when, please?
January 2nd to February 1st for phase 2.
Oh, and January 1st to February 1st. 1 Jan to 1 Feb. Okay. And then phase 3?
Phase 3 would be February 2nd to March 5th.
February to what? When in March?
March 5th.
5 March. All right. So is that the only change from the document that I received to the document that Susie, you sent out this morning?
Yes, the dates are the only
change. Okay. So let me just make sure. Phase 1 is November 30th to the 1st of January. Phase 2 is the 1st of January to the 1st of February. And phase 3 is the 2nd of February to the 5th of March.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. All right. I do have other questions, but I will yield to questions, comments from committee members.
All right. This has to be read with what we got from Susie, Mrs. Smith this morning, correct?
Yes. I understand.
This is the funding for the positions that are mentioned. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right.
All right. And
there's materials and there's a purchase of contract services, right? All right. Yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Fred.
Well, this is part of the so-called, and I hate to use the term, but the defund the police policy of substituting almost social worker types for police officers, correct? Not for police officers, but making it part of the anti-crime effort. Is that my understanding? I mean, it's hard to read this thing so quickly. I just got it, but
mainly focused on violence interruption and building like a community-centered group that's liaison between the police and the mayor's office.
Yeah. Okay.
Develop those community leaders within the community that could step up, try to intervene. We would teach them skills, trainings on de-escalation, conflict resolution.
All right, that's exactly what I thought. I think that when I first read it, I'm kind of rolling my eyes, going, contract positions, the mayor's office. I don't really like the idea, but if we're going to put our money where our mouths are when it comes to this sort of thing, then I think this is a necessary transfer. I'm supportive.
I have a lot more questions, but Alderwoman Finlayson, please.
I too have a lot of questions. But before we begin, I would like to hear a description of this program, as well as the background data that supports the need for it. Because it sounds, we're hearing two different things. There's no question that we have an issue with homicides in the city, and we have for some time prior to the pandemic. And so it feels as if we're using the pandemic as a reason to do some of these feel-good kinds of programs. And I take that back, because they're not feel-good kinds of programs. They're programs that are needed in the community. But, when we created the liaison positions in the mayor's office. Those positions were supposed to be doing exactly the kinds of connections to the community that we're now paying somebody else to do. So I would like to hear, one, a detailed description of what this program is, and two, the background data that will support the need, as well as on the other end, how we're going to measure the success of this program and when that will take place.
Okay. Susie, did
you go ahead?
Yeah, I did have one question. Did you say we're paying someone to do this?
Well, yeah, I'm looking at the document that I received yesterday, and we're paying a lot of people to do exactly what you just said, which was to be liaisons to the community,
right,
to keep their, and that is exactly why your position, the position you hold today, was created to do that exact work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know exactly if violence interruption was a part of my job description, but that's something that I definitely took on when I came in. And this is a program designed to create a actual infrastructure for a violence interruption program that the city could keep, use, what have you. But, you know, in my capacity, I'm a liaison to the community. So as far as background, I've done my research, and we don't have any violence interruption programs in the city. So that, you know, being that there have been several homicides during this pandemic and there's been a lot of community outcry, you know, we actually have been waiting to try to push this program. So it really wasn't that we created it just because of what's going on. It's that we've been waiting to push this program, but we focused on the substance abuse part of harm reduction first. And we wanted to expand. We already intended to have violence interruption be a part of our harm reduction strategy with no harm. It's just that, you know, with the significant rise of fatal overdoses, we focused on the, you know, the substance abuse angle first. So we have actually been trying to push this violence interruption program, but now that, you know, we've kind of like run out of options on the law enforcement side, we've tried to, you know, we're pushing this community-based approach to try to build up people from the community to intervene and try to stop altercations from you know, escalating beyond, I mean, to a violent level.
May I interrupt you for a moment? And that's admirable. What is this, the violence interruption program we're looking at?
Yes.
What is, because I didn't see that anywhere, at least in the first page of this document, but this is the violence interruption program?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, can I add something there too, please?
Please.
I wanted to only put this in the context that TOLA developed the NAM program in the past, which was funded through the health department and OEM. The next phase of NAM was to be no harm. So this isn't a program that's out of sort of whole cloth. It is the progressive part of working communities. And I have to say also, just want to add in here, because I know you know this is true, but I feel like I need to say it. What we really have learned through the pandemic and in the mayor's office, and I think in the city generally, that when one puts kind of a hands-on on these problems, we get farther. That somehow to think that we can do a computer model or put things online or have a project that doesn't put people in the field is just not as successful. You know, we have had our educators in the field. What we call educators, those are the people who have been doing education on what, in fact, the actual information is about the pandemic. That has been enormously successful because it's putting people in the field at their own risk, I might add. So I think there's a lesson here we've learned in the efforts of the mayor's office. One person can't be in the field everywhere, which is why we add these individuals who work on contract and hourly. And we have brought into the reputation of the city people who are very successful at doing this. You know, I don't know whether you ever have this experience where people are saying to you, I didn't know that the city really cared about this. But when we put people closer in, doing work, whether it's the surveys that we were doing before or harm reduction now, it is a very successful tool to have the city's position, the reputation of the city front and center in communities. So I just want to add that. I'm sorry to interrupt you all.
Ms. Smith, I understand what you're saying, and I totally agree. And that is how the office of the mayor grew, because the original intent, and my colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, the original intent was to put staff in the mayor's office to be those boots on the ground so that we could keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on in the community, and particularly as it relates to crime in our community. So yes, this is an effort that started prior administrations, and now we have grown it. I think it would have been very helpful for all of us had we seen an outline of the program in total, probably during the budget process, so that we would know what's coming. But instead, now we see little pieces of it as it reaches us. Some of it gets to us through the community because we don't hear it from in-house. You know, we have to learn about things from others and, you know, feel uninformed because we should be hearing this. So, you know, put it on paper and not, you know, a day-to-day thing. And I know there are things that change, but, you know, the initial funding that came in for that NAM program was, 2 years ago? We should have had an outline of the whole program with tweaks as needed. You know, that would help everyone, and that would have eliminated the need for all of the questions that you're going to get today. You know, instead of just giving us a piece of paper the day before, and then we have to kind of figure it out and ask you questions. So anyway, thank you for that. I still need the data to support the need for this particular piece of the program. And is it, and I can't figure out what this piece of the program is, because violence interruption doesn't say it, that doesn't speak to that anywhere on this paper that I'm reading. So this piece of violence interruption fits how in the big scheme of things with what desired outcomes?
So,
Mr. Jai, are you there?
Yeah. So we created a values system for the value group for the No Harm program, and it's one to empathize with people, meaning to meet people where they're at, engage directly with people in the community, offering individuals personal support or resources, empower them, meaning giving individuals seeking support or resources access to systems that can benefit their quality of life, and to enrich them through building on an individual's success and peer upliftment, develop resilient, sustainable community-based support networks. So that's kind of like the values that we want them to bring into the community. And the people that we would be doing this would be I would be coordinating the program, but then we would have a community outreach support navigator who would be basically a case manager for people that are referred to services. Now, the neighborhood engagement specialist would oversee the contract workers, which would be the VIP team. So the No Harm VIP stands for Violence Interruption Program. And they are the VIP team. So they'd be the contractors, 10 of them in the community, working up to 30 hours a week. We prefer them to work, in like late night hours, so that they're in the community when, statistics would show that more violent crime happens later on in the day. So those are the hours we would want them in the communities. And then we would have them rotating and, like usually two to four people groups into different communities. And they would give a report each day about what they've observed or how many people they've helped. And so they would refer people who want resources to the neighborhood engagement specialists. And then they would, give that information to the community support navigator. That information would be collected weekly into a report that they would give to me, and I would give to the chief of staff, and then she could from there share it with you all. So we wanted to report monthly. So we wanted to have a 90-day program trial, and every 30 days we would have a review to see the outcomes. So the outcomes that we focused on, one is to reduce violent crime in the city of Annapolis, homicides, domestic violence, any type of, domestic community violence. We want to reduce those in high crime areas. And we would use the APD statistics to gauge the success rates of this program in the target communities. So, how we measure that day to day would be just to check the data day to day about crimes committed. And then, I would be in charge of doing like an analysis monthly, and then on the final report, being able to show exactly what the metrics are for crime, violent crime in the city in those particular areas. So we would, definitely keep a transparent reporting system for you all, and for the, the public.
I think it would be helpful if you could give us in writing your goals and your outcomes, as well as if we could count on receiving maybe a monthly report as to the status of reaching those goals. And where are you in the police department? Because I noticed the police APD is not included in this, even though many of these activities seem to be policing activities. And I am concerned that we are kind of treading into the police's department without giving them an opportunity to weigh in. So have you had this discussion and shared this with the police chief?
Yes, we've discussed it with Chief Jackson. I actually sat down with the individuals that he wanted to bring in from Baltimore that have violence interruption program. So, we got to, talk about, their program and what they could bring to the city. So they're part of this. We would definitely be in support with them.
Well, good. I would like to hear from them, Mr. Chair. I think at the next meeting, if we could have the police APD's staff who will be involved in this program, I think it might be helpful. Thank you.
That's consistent with, so I have a number of comments and concerns. The first one I will state generally, which is, this is why I believe that the mayor's office needs to submit a performance measurement plan that did not get submitted, because it is impossible for us to know all the things that you're doing, or even if there is a plan, or is it we're sort of making it up as we go along. And I know that sounds pejorative, but I have to tell you That's very much how it feels to me. But let me tick off my major points. I really do see a lot of this as duplicative, overlapping, and possibly even getting in the way of things that we expect to be done by the police department. And I refer to that $100,000 grant that we got, which I think you alluded to, Tola, about, or maybe it was Susie, about modeling as opposed to hands-on. But nevertheless, when you go through here, you look about counting shots fired and those sorts of things, which are very clearly in the purview of the police department. So I'd really like to know, first of all, how this is coordinated with APD, how it's not duplicated, how we're actually showing in an accountable way a cooperation, because many of these things feel to me like a lot of the same things we're hearing from Chief Jackson about a move to community policing. Although I have to tell you, I'm very uncomfortable that I have no idea what that plan really is. And maybe this is even more well-developed than that community policing plan, but I think that's critical. We really do need to see, we've heard NAM, no harm. Sounds like there's a whole series of programs that are in your mind, but are not in to our knowledge. And again, would be part of an overall performance measurement kind of a system, so we can check off, this is being done, this is being done. Tola, you mentioned success, and Susie too, success measures. I see nothing here that tells me what measures of success are, and I think they're critical. How will we know whether the program is doing good other than hearsay from you without some sort of metrics and success measures? Specific to this proposal, I see it as an incredible mix of what appears to me to be contracts and purchase of supplies. But when I look under the contract, I see under the contract, there's a whole bunch of purchases of supply. I see VIP contractors. I have no idea who they are, but I have some real questions about whether we're following proper procurement processes. If we're picking a vendor, that needs to be competitive. That you can't just go self-select a vendor. That is a big no-no in the whole procurement process. And then there's nothing here that talks about reporting the outcomes of this program. So I've heard something that sounds like there's an overall violence reduction program. Lord knows we need that. I think that's what Alderman Payon was indicating in his earlier remarks. We totally support that. But this is just not in a form that I could support in any way. There's too many big holes. And it's a part of the problem of getting this thing at the last minute and trying to push it through that I find so objectionable. We have lots of value added that we can and must provide for these programs. And it feels like this is an activity that is going on in parallel with and totally separate from and distinct from similar kinds of activities that the police department are talking to us about. And we don't have enough resources to have two parallel efforts. We really need to have coordinated, efficient, and effective efforts. Now, if you were to tell me, well, we don't want to work with police because they bring a certain, I don't want to use the word taint, but aura, and that this will be less acceptable in the community if it doesn't have the patina of some kind of a police operation, that's fine. But that needs to be stated, and that needs to be shown that that's something that we need to do to make this program effective. But I have to say, I can't figure this out. I can't figure out what is contracts, and if they're contracts, they have to be done through a procurement process, and what is supplies, and even there, I think there are procurement rules. These dollar amounts, a no harm program coordinator, $5,400. What is that? Is that salary? Are there benefits? How is that being spent? And all the way through the no harm neighborhood engagement specialist. It just feels to me like this is kind of very much ballparkish, and maybe that's the best we can do now, but I don't think that it meets procurement standards. So those are my wishes before I would be willing to move forward with supporting this transfer and this financial stuff. Alderman Payon.
Thank you.
I'll recognize you, but I do want to hear a response from Tola and Ms. Smith about my comments.
Mr. Chair, when do we meet again?
Well, we meet every 2 weeks, Fred.
Well, why don't we come revisit this in 2 weeks if that's possible? I've got some of the same questions you have, and I think they can be easily answered if we have a little bit of time to go through this. And if Mr. Ajay or Mrs. Smith would also have the time to maybe go over some of this with us. I think it's that simple. I think the heart's in the right place on this, but it's not being translated perhaps quite as well as we would like, although obviously somebody's put a lot of work in to outline as much as they have. I think I think we're kind of having a discussion a little bit in the dark here. Why don't we just come back and do this in 2 weeks and save everybody some time and go into the detail at that point that we really need to do? Is this so time sensitive that we can't do that?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, please.
The time sensitivity is obviously that this is a crisis in the city. And so it is time to try to address it. Whether we can wait 2 weeks, obviously, if that's the committee's, we'll have to do that. But I also want to tell the chairman that we work very specifically with both our contracting legal obligations and where their definition of procurement applies to us. We are not operating outside of the system of the city. And there's one other thing that I want to say.
Let me stop you right there, though. Is this VIP a contractor or a concept? And if it is, was there a procurement process that went through to select VIP?
I'm not sure I know what you're asking there.
Well, we have in here a breakdown of contract money and supply money, and part of the contract money is apparently to this firm. Look at the very last page. No Harm VIP Contractors. Is that a company, or what is the nature of these contractors? And if they're contractors, was there a procurement process followed?
I don't think it's a company.
No, it's not a company. It's the summary of the information from the first page.
All right, but when you go to those earlier pages and you look at these things, it looks to me like there is a mix of monies. I don't know whether it's salary or just a bounty or a payment of some sort, and then T-shirts. And boy, there's a lot of money being spent on T-shirts. $2,400 times 3 for T-shirts is in the phases. Is that part of the contract money? This is not easy to follow in an accounting form, and there has to be some kind of procurement oversight. So is there coordination with Brian Snyder about how these monies are being spent? And if so, is there documentation of that?
Right. When we do again, experience has shown that people identifying with these programs, the reason for the T-shirts, the hats, etc., we leave a mark for people's commitments and involvement and support in the communities. So that's a kind of tried and true. And yes, when we get to, there's the dollars and all the rest of it with Brian, then of course we're involved with him on the procurement. I want to make one other comment though about the Alderwoman Finlayson's request for data and the other committee members. One of the reasons we have gotten to this design is because we don't have that data. The police department does not keep this data. We have asked for them to have data. We've done everything we can over the last month, and it's just not there. And I'm not trying to be critical, it's just not there. So we are working on a theory of community, engagement, and solutions. Nobody wants to be more clear about whether this is the right design for that. Are we accomplishing what we're trying to do, particularly in this pandemic time, which has been more difficult even, but it isn't just this time. So talking about whether or not the police are involved, this is a community up approach. We work with the police department on all these projects. You know, they aren't the solution to it. They haven't been the solution. Community policing is something wholly different. And will this work? We're going to find out, hopefully. Maybe it won't. But that's what we need to kind of get off our first base here, because we've got a problem in the city and we can't stay at the status quo. And I am saying this as though the rest of you don't understand this. I know you understand that. So this is a effort to do something there.
But no, let me respond first, please. I find that astounding, and I hope the city manager is still on. But if you're telling me that the police department cannot tell us about gunshots and gunshot victims on November 20th, so December 12th, or the first period was November 2nd through December 27th, which I assume those dates are changed. That is an astounding piece of information, and I find very devastating, and a total indictment of what the hell are we spending $22 million for policing if we can't provide simple pieces of information like that. But if the police can't provide it, how are you providing it? Is it hearsay from the community? Is the community just saying, we heard there were gunshots at such and such a time and we know of a gunshot victim that the police don't know about during this time period? I mean, this is mind-boggling to me.
You know, the police department don't have people everywhere either. And when you say hearsay, that I don't mean to, sometimes that is what we have to go on, because there's no police officer around, and the community residents, in fact, do hear the police. And I think we're not talking about just whether or not we can gather the simple facts. It's that we don't seem to be able to gather an integrated set of data about where it's happening, the rapidity. I mean, it's asking the next steps. And this is what TOLA is quite good at, is taking the basic data. And as I say, this is an effort. This is a test. If this doesn't work, then it wouldn't be worth going on. But what we need is greater depth in our communities about what the residents are feeling and what in fact we need to do. It would inform the police. Frankly, it would inform the council, because then you would feel more comfortable than you feel right now at trying something new or working on a program that's less defined perhaps than you're used to with most of the programs that we do. I understand that. This is an effort. And if, you know, I don't think there's any of you that would say, I'm happy with where we are now. I mean, I just don't think anybody feels that way. We certainly don't. I'm assuming you don't.
But would you please understand, we'll track the amount of gunshots. Is that incidences of gunfire, or is that the actual number of shots and gunshot victims? And my question is, how is that tracking being done? And why is it not available from the police department? And believe me, and I would ask Alderman Payon to carry these questions over to the Public Safety Committee to ask the police department why, in fact, they can't just readily turn this set of information over to be analyzed. But then my second whole question of that is, if it's 3 instances of gunfire and 1 gunshot victim, what does that mean versus 20 incidences and 10 victims? I mean, how is this all being analyzed? And again, why in the world isn't our police department, the supposed professionals that we're asking to provide policing, why aren't they doing this? I mean, if you're saying they're not doing it at all, that to me is a huge problem, much bigger than this effort.
But I think there's going to be a confusion too, because the data point, because Alderman Finlayson just asked, how do we get to this? And I explained, we used the data of murders and incidents of violence that the mayor's office and the city has addressed. Most recently, the murder on Clay Street. But this program is not meant to be a data analytics program at all. This is a community-driven program to promote prevention and intervention. So that's why I just wanted to make clear that I wanted to know what you guys are seeing that looks like what the police do, because the police do not do violence prevention. And I just wanted to see what program might be confusing so that I can
I'll get just one second. You're right, they don't, and that's what I'm worried about, because I don't think we have true community policing proposed by the police department, because it seems to me like one of the #1 objectives of policing is to prevent violence. And
this is what this program is supposed to partner with the police to do.
Sheila, thank you for being patient. Please, I'd like to hear your voice.
Well, first of all, I think it's a gross misrepresentation to say that the police don't have the data. And having worked with our police department for well over 10 years, I know that they do have the data. And I know that we have a department, the department where our detectives are, that do keep their finger on the pulse of what's going on in our community. You don't see it. The community doesn't see it, but it exists. And I can tell you from personal experience, I've gone to them and sat down to tell them what I've heard in the community. And they were well aware. It appears that now we're responding to an incident instead of having a wraparound effort that's going to speak to all the concerns. You know, there's no question that we've got to address guns in our community, that we've got to address the lack of jobs in our community and the drug dealing in our community and the violence, the fighting between the communities. There's no question about that. But we're working in silos. You know, you guys are not working with the police department, because if you're going to say that they don't have the data, then you're not working with the police department. Nobody's working with us to tell us what's going on so that we can keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on in our wards. And most of us know what's going on in our wards and share that information. You know, so we've got to make a conscious effort to work together. The police chief was not included in this, and he should be on this call. And I've texted him to ask him to get on, but we need him at the next meeting. And we need to be comforted in knowing that the police department is working in concert with the mayor's office. You know, the last time we got something from the mayor's office, that $55,000 grant, I heard very clearly Mr. Ajayi say he was given permission. The chief said not to worry. I have to approve anything that goes to the state. And I heard Mr. Ajayi say, oh no, I've gotten permission so they can take my authority for this grant, which overstepped, in my mind, the police chief's authority. That's not a collaborative relationship in my mind. And the fact that we think that we can work independently, I think, is a terrible mistake. You know, if the programs that have been in place for the last 3 years have been working, then let's see the results. Okay, and I agree, we have to keep trying, but the fact that we're going to continue to pull in different directions is not getting us to where we need to be. So let's make sure at the next meeting that the police chief is there and his data analyst is there and the person that he has brought in to deal with these types of programs is there, so that we can hear the whole program, and more importantly, that we can see that everyone is working together to solve this violent crime problem. Now, I can't help but recall about 2 months ago when I took a gentleman from the county into the mayor's office to talk about his efforts in our city and his ability to keep his finger on the pulse of what was going on, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. We talked about bringing the mothers in to have some discussions, to get their support, but nothing happened. So let's see if we're sincere about wanting to address this program, or we're only going to do it one way. And we're going to leave the police out, and we're going to leave certain segments of the community out, and we're going to leave other leaders out. I think we need to be on the same page with this and other efforts. It could be a good thing, but let's see. Hopefully you'll be willing to bring your information. You don't want to call it data, that's fine. Your information to us at the next meeting.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, Tola. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I need to make a statement here. It is not, in fact, true that Tola said that the police department was not involved in the lead grant, which is what.
That's not what I said.
Can I respond, Susie? Because that first,
look at the tape. Look at the tape before you speak.
Can I respond, Susie? Because we can clear this up real quick. But first, my name is Ajayi, not Ajayi.
I'm sorry if I pronounced him incorrectly. Finlayson. Okay.
Ajayi. But the only thing that I had to say is that I said the governor's office, who gave me approval to be the authorized signer for the grant, that allowed me to authorize the grant. I don't need to get approval from the police chief. That is not overstepping him. That's just a fact of me being able to be the authorized signer for the grant. So if you felt that way, I understand, but that was not done intentionally. That was just a process of the grant. So anything else I'd like to, that you feel, I think that we could either have a discussion about, because some things you said are not accurate. And it seems like you're trying to, it's how you feel, and it's not accurate. It's not accurate representation. We work hand in hand with the mayor's office.
So let me stop this, Mr. Ajayi. I would like to convey to you, and I think that every one of these members of the committee are conveying to you too. And I did this long ago when we got a request a few years ago that I said only $40,000. I am not interested in interfering with the work you're doing. I support it. I think this committee supports it. I think the council supports it. But I am concerned that we don't have enough resources to do this, and I am concerned that I don't feel that there's enough coordination and cross-pollination between your efforts and the police department. I think we need to establish some boundaries. I alluded earlier that I think that there is a possibility that you need to be operating in some venues independently of the police because of the specter that police involvement would potentially bring to that in the community. I get that. I'm not sure because it's not really my area of expertise, but I'm willing to accept that that's a possibility. Our particular responsibility from this committee is to make sure that we understand what we're allocating monies to, and to understand whether this is enough money, too much money, whatever, and that it's being done following proper procedures. And so some of the questions that I've raised and others of the committee have raised have to do with fulfilling our financial responsibility, our stewardship, our fiduciary responsibility, not questioning your program per se. To that end, I think we do need more detail. I feel an obligation to give you, and I want to work with the committee members on this, but I would be very much willing to draft up and send to you and Ms. Smith the kinds of areas of concern that I ticked off, and there's 6 of them, which I would hope would be constructive in relooking at this to give us a better feel for what's going on. So I would implore you not to construe from what we're doing here today to be roadblock in any way unconstructive in terms of doing what I think you've been hired to do and what I think you've been working on diligently. But we are kind of operating in a vacuum. I have the sense that you have a whole series of things, starting with NAM and no harm and a whole bunch of other things. And I would really want to know about that. I would really like to see the whole program laid out. In fact, I'd like to see it so I can tout it. When I get bombarded by people in the community that want the gunshots fired, I can say, we're working on it. We've got a policing effort that's going on, but we have a community effort that's going on, and it's going on in a very well laid out, very rigorous fashion. Believe me, that would get some people off my back big time, and I would look forward to that relief. So again, we're trying to do the things that we need to do to be financial stewards. I hope we're also giving you an outside perspective that gives you some constructive criticism, if that's how you want to frame it, to better package this and make it more presentable to the community. So having made that long statement, I will get you in a second, but I want to say I sense our time is running out, but also I sense it is the sense of the community, of the committee, to postpone and take this up again at our next meeting. And I would ask the committee, and I will give you a word, Susie, but I can write up my notes, or I can write them up and share them with you. You can help me refine it, and we can quickly get them to Mr. Ajayi so that he'll have a basis to respond to us at our next Finance Committee meeting, which I'll accept a motion for that after we hear from Ms. Smith.
I just wanted to add one other thing. You talked about the LEAD grant, Alderwoman Finlayson. You specifically added to the approvals of the appropriations that the police chief have a sign up on the manager position. We did that. He did that. So I want you to know we would welcome your questions for the next discussion. But also I wanted you to know that as you wished and directed, that's exactly what we did.
Thank you.
And the person, if she's not been hired this week, she's momentarily going to be hired. Thank you.
Thank you.
So committee, is there a motion that we can consider?
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we postpone.
Fred, you're on mute.
Yeah, what I said before, I think we ought to just postpone a vote and postpone, final discussion for 2 weeks. 2 weeks is plenty of time to get the information I think I need. It's plenty of time for me. I can't imagine it isn't for others. And if we need to have the chief here or his representative, then so be it. Might be more of a...
I'll second that.
All right. I want to thank the committee for a productive meeting. I understand that we're delaying a vital program a little bit longer, but personally, I will vote in favor of this motion to postpone because I think we can refine the program in very significant ways and hopefully get it in even more successful than I hope we all hope it will be. And I think that there's some way I would feel a need to get a better understanding of why there should be separate operations. And maybe that's a public meeting, maybe that's a closed session, but Mr. Ajayi, and then we need to take a vote.
Okay, I just want to say, so for the next meeting, can I invite some of the community partners so that...
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Please.
I want to, I definitely would love to have the police come and explain all the things they're going, but like you said, and like we've been pushing to our offices, community policing, we want to make the community part just as strong as the policing part. And so if I can bring on some of the community partners and they can explain what we've already discussed and what we're ready to roll out, you'll be able to see more of the perspective of what I'm talking about, because I can't really explain all the things that the mental health people are ready to do and that they're ready to collaborate and, and substance abuse and reentry and stuff like that. So I'll just invite them to the next.
I would welcome that. Committee members, is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fabulous idea. And
I would hope that you don't bring, half a dozen or a dozen.
Why not? I'll bring 50. If that's what it takes, bring 50.
Well,
I don't care.
If I can listen to Ross for an hour.
The timeline.
I guess I can listen to them.
Well, all right. We have a motion before us to postpone. Is there any further discussion? Failing that, all in favor of postponing signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, are we making sure that the chief and his appropriate staff will also be in attendance?
Takia, if you could take care of that for us, I would appreciate that. We do have a little bit of time for general discussion, which is usually an update from the finance director, but unless there's something urgent, I have a lot of other urgent things. Jody, is there anything quickly or can we?
No, I just wanted to let you know that we've just finished the COVID update through October, or actually it was through November the 9th where I grabbed the data. So we'll be sending that report out to you. And the next thing I'll be getting to you is the projections for 21 based on the October 31st activity to date. But that's going to take another week or so.
All right.
Boy, that'll be a happy report, no doubt.
I hope it's a good report, but I don't know. I can't promise anything.
Okay.
I also would like for the next meeting to see if we can get a presentation from Katie on where we are on OpenGov. I am working with Alderman Savage to put together a timeline, a long timeline, starting, I think, from 2005. In 2005, I noticed that the expenditures for fire were 2/3 of expenditure for police. Now they're the same in terms of the overall expenditure level. And I'd like to have a better understanding over time how that parity grew to be the same. So if it's
not connected, is that connected to OpenGov?
Well, I don't know. I think OpenGov has a time series capability, does it not?
Not going back that far. OpenGov populates by taking data out of our Munis system by transactions. OpenGov was only 5 days during FY12, and I would say that I would only rely on the consistency of the Munis transaction data fund to fund and comparably for 18, 19, 20, and 21.
Well, I will alert you to the fact that for this next budget exercise by the Finance Committee, and I hope the Council as a committee of the whole, I want to look at time series trends. And I want to look at how our expenditures have grown from 40 million to 150 million. I want to look at where that growth has occurred, and I want to look at the distribution of growth amongst departments. I just happened across that 2005 report, was thumbing through it, and was struck by what I think is quite a significant change. I'm not aware of any new services that were being provided by fire now that weren't then. So to me, if we're going to dissect the budget and understand how we got to where we are, and then further understand how we're going to meet this deficit, we need to understand where we've been. And that, to me, for my background, my professional background, is a time series analysis, a trend analysis. So I think I just heard from you, OpenGov will not provide that. And so that means I need to go to all of the CAFRs and start concocting or building a time series.
You will find that the structure of the fund and stuff throughout time was not equal. They're not the same. You're not comparing apples to apples. So that takes a bit of analysis and adjustment. And hearing what you're saying back to 2005, that's a very time-consuming project because of those adjustments that have to be made. We're coming up on starting the budget process, and I will tell you that this year I've got me and Katie, and for right now, no other assistants. So in last year, you know that Katie spent like 400 hours of overtime between January and June working on the budget. Yeah. And that's why we had some assistance. We're thankful for that. Yes, and we had some assistance in transition from the former city manager, but she's not going to be assisting this year, so it's just going to be the two of us. So if there's some major time series thing, we might have to bring in somebody to assist us with this. Get it done on a timely basis for budget.
I think we need to do that. When I moved from the Bureau of Economic Analysis to Health and Human Services, I was struck by the difference of being used to looking at time series analysis and percent change in distribution to cross-sectional analysis. And I think one of our flaws as a finance committee and a city council is we tend to only look at the current year. We don't have an understanding of where commitments in the current year are taking us, and we certainly don't have a strong understanding of how we got to where we are. But we quite often get asked, how come under Ellen Moyer we were spending 40 million and under Mayor Buckley we're spending 150? And I cannot answer that. It is more than just cost of living, CPI adjustments.
Yeah,
so
there's all kinds of elements going in and out of there that will adjust it up and down. And like I say, when you get that far back, you have to identify those differences. You can't compare them. They're not comparable after that much time.
I think I saw your hand, Sheila.
Yeah, it might be helpful, and I hate to make this suggestion, but HR needs to weigh in, I think, as to what
that would be a part. Yeah, that would be a part of the analysis: is number of people, positions, how they were added, why they were added.
Well, and as far as negotiated agreements are concerned, you know, what was negotiated, and if there is any history as to why, you know, things happened the way they did. We went a number of years, for example, without any pay raises for our employees. And I mean, at least 5, and I think it was longer than that.
I thought it was 8.
8, okay. So I think that has to be a consideration when we look at, for example, the jump in cost of employees, as well as the age of the employees. So when, you know, if we're looking at it, we have to look at all the pieces that contribute to the whole.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying it's quite an effort to do something like that for that long of a time span. It's worthwhile, but it will cost us because, like I said, we can't do both at the same time.
Well, and I'm not suggesting that you do it all. I mean, HR could have a piece of it, and each department may have a piece that they could share about, you know, increases in their department, programmatic increase or programmatic changes that brought about increases and that kind of thing. So we, you know, spread the work around. Thank you.
So I think we have to find a way, if it's something that can be easily contracted out, which I bet not because of the value added. Jody, you're correctly telling us it's not just go to the CAFR and plop in the numbers. I've actually started that effort several times. We run into that one Tim Elliott year where we have this really strange jump up in spending that we can't really reconcile, but I think we have to do that. particularly now that we have the big deficit issues facing us. We'll be talking about this again tomorrow, and we're going to have to figure out how we're going to address that. And
we are already working on addressing this year's deficit. It's the next year that's going to be the hurdle.
Yeah, it's not going to be fun.
No.
All right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
You're going to have to unmute so you can say it.
Move to adjourn.
Yeah, you missed your cue.
Yeah, second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone. A lot of good work by the committee today. I will get you my notes so you can edit and amend them, but I feel obligated to get something to Susie and Tola pretty quickly so they can help us at the next meeting.
Ross, I'll send you a few notes also.
Thank you.
But could I speak to you and Fred after we go off?
Sure.
I mean, if we could stand for a minute, I just have something there.
So the meeting is adjourned.